A widow with 3 daughters saves a wounded man, unaware he's the most feared duke. Maria lived in a small, quiet village, far away from the noise of the city. Her house was simple, made of wood and stone, with a small garden where she grew vegetables and herbs. Since the death of her husband, life had been hard. Every day was a struggle to make sure her 3 daughters, Anna, Leela, and Sophie, had enough food and clothing. The youngest, Sophie, was only 7, full of energy and curiosity, while Anna, at 16, was careful and responsible, always helping her mother with chores. Leela, 12, loved to read and dreamed of a life beyond the village, often imagining adventures that could take her far away. Despite their struggles, they had each other, and that made life a little brighter. One evening, the sky was dark and heavy with rain. Thunder rumbled softly in the distance, and the wind howled through the trees. Maria was in the kitchen, stirring a pot of soup, while her daughters tidied the small living room. Suddenly, a loud, desperate knock echoed through the house. Maria froze for a moment, her heart beating quickly. At this hour, visitors were rare. The rain was pouring harder now, soaking everything outside. Cautiously, Maria opened the door. On the doorstep lay a man, soaked and trembling with blood staining his clothes. He was young, perhaps in his late 20s, but the pain and fear in his face made him look older. Without thinking, Maria rushed forward and helped him inside. She guided him to a chair by the fireplace while her daughters looked on, wide-eyed. Sophie clutched a small doll, unsure whether to cry or stay quiet. "Mother, is he hurt?" Anna asked, her voice trembling. "Yes," Maria replied, her voice steady despite the fear she felt. "We must help him." She grabbed a clean towel and pressed it gently against a deep cut on his arm. He winced but said nothing. His breathing was heavy, and it was clear he had been injured badly. Maria could see bruises on his face and scratches on his hands, probably from a fall or a fight. "Be careful," Leela whispered, but she stepped forward to help her mother. Together, they washed the wound as best as they could with warm water, cleaned it carefully, and wrapped it with strips of cloth torn from an old sheet. The man's clothes were ruined, soaked through with rain and blood, and Maria quickly brought him a blanket. He finally stirred and opened his eyes. They were a striking blue, filled with pain and confusion. For a moment he looked at them silently, as if unsure whether he could trust them. "Don't worry," Maria said softly. "You are safe here. We will help you." The man gave a faint nod, then closed his eyes again, exhausted from the journey and the injuries. Maria lit a lantern and set it on the table nearby, casting a warm glow across the room. She could hear the rain beating against the windows, loud and unrelenting, but inside the house there was a sense of calm. The daughters quietly moved around, helping their mother prepare some simple food, though the man did not seem interested. Maria watched him carefully. There was something about him she could not understand, something unusual. He moved with a quiet strength even in his pain. His hands were strong and steady despite the wounds, and there was a certain dignity in his face, a calmness that did not belong to a common traveler. Yet he said nothing about who he was or why he was injured. Maria decided not to ask, knowing that pressing him might frighten him away. As the night went on, the man gradually began to recover from the worst of his exhaustion. He shifted slightly in the chair and Maria offered him some warm broth. He took it slowly, nodding in appreciation. His voice, when he spoke, was low but clear. "Thank you," he said simply. "I am in your debt." Maria shook her head. "There is no debt here. You needed help and we gave it, that is all." The daughters listened in silence, fascinated by the stranger. They had never seen anyone like him before. His clothes were different from what villagers usually wore, and even soaked and dirty, there was a certain elegance in his appearance. Layla, in particular, could not stop staring. She whispered to Anna, "He looks important. Maybe he is a traveler from the city." Anna shushed her, but Maria only smiled quietly. She did not care about who he was or what he had done before. All that mattered was that he was in need and they had given him shelter. Outside, the storm raged on. The wind bent the trees, and rain flooded the small path to their house. Maria knew that traveling at this hour would be dangerous. It was clear the man could not leave until morning. She made a bed on the floor with blankets and pillows so he could rest comfortably. He seemed to appreciate the gesture and lay down carefully, closing his eyes. The next morning, the storm had passed, leaving the village wet and quiet. The man had slept through the night, but Maria could see that his strength was slowly returning. She and the daughters went about their morning chores, preparing breakfast and tending to the small garden. The man watched them quietly, occasionally lending a hand with simple tasks. It was strange, Maria thought, to see someone so strong and capable needing help in such a humble home. As the day progressed, Maria began to notice small details. He spoke with careful manners, almost like someone educated, and he seemed to know things about the land and farming that surprised her. Yet he never revealed his name or where he had come from. Maria did not press, though curiosity burned in her mind. The daughters, however, could not help but whisper and speculate. Sophie asked, "Mother, do you think he is a prince?" Maria laughed softly. "No, Sophie, he is just a man who needed help." But even she could not shake the feeling that this man was different. Word of the stranger quickly spread through the village. Neighbors came to peek from a distance, curious about who he might be. Maria felt nervous. The village was usually safe, but a wounded man arriving alone was unusual. Some villagers whispered about the dangers of strangers, and Maria worried about what might happen if the wrong people found him here. But whenever she looked at him, she felt only gratitude. Without her help, he might have died in the rain. Over the next few days, the man slowly regained his strength. He helped with simple tasks around the house, sometimes carrying firewood or helping in the garden. The daughters began to warm to him, laughing at small jokes he made and admiring the way he seemed to understand things so quickly. Maria, too, felt a quiet comfort in his presence. It was strange, she realized, how someone so hurt could still bring a sense of calm and hope into her home. One evening, as the sun set and the sky turned orange and pink, the man spoke for the first time about his life. He told them he had traveled far and faced many dangers. He spoke carefully, never giving too much away, but Maria could sense that he had been through hardships far beyond what they could imagine. The daughters listened with wide eyes, hanging on every word. "You have done more for me than I could ever repay," he said softly. "Your kindness saved me," Maria shook her head. "There is no need to repay us. We did what any family would do," she smiled gently. "Now rest and get better. That is all we ask." That night the family sat together, the warmth of the fire filling the small room. Maria watched her daughters, thinking of how life had changed for them since their father passed. Perhaps this stranger had come into their lives for a reason, she thought, teaching them that courage and kindness could appear in the most unexpected ways. She did not know who he was or what challenges lay ahead, but she was certain of one thing: he was safe in their home, and for now, that was enough. The days that followed were filled with small routines. The man, still quiet about his past, began to smile more often. Anna taught him simple tasks around the house. Leela shared stories and dreams with him, and Sophie would occasionally sneak him small gifts she had made herself. Maria watched all this quietly, feeling a sense of pride in her daughters. They were kind, brave, and generous, even when life had been hard to them. Maria could not imagine what the future would bring, but she knew that for the first time in many months, their home was filled with hope. She did not know that this stranger would soon change more than their home. He would change their lives forever. But for now, all that mattered was the safety, the warmth, and the quiet bond that had begun to form in the small, rain-soaked village home. Days passed quietly in the small village, and the wounded man slowly began to regain his strength. Each morning, he would wake to the soft light streaming through the windows, and the smell of warm bread or fresh herbs would fill the room. Maria had begun to notice that he moved with care, as if each step and gesture was measured, showing discipline and a quiet strength that made her both curious and uneasy. He never spoke much about his past, and when he did, it was only small hints, stories of long journeys, places he had visited, and experiences that suggested he had lived a life far different from that of a simple villager. Anna was the first to notice how polite and careful he was. She had seen many travelers over the years, people from nearby towns or distant villages, but none had manners like his. He would always say please and thank you, and he never demanded anything. He helped without being asked and spoke to the girls gently, never raising his voice even when he was frustrated or tired. Layla, on the other hand, was fascinated by the small details of his hands, the way they moved gracefully despite the scars and bruises. She wondered what kind of life he had led to earn such marks. Sophie simply adored him, following him around the house, asking endless questions and laughing at his quiet smiles. Despite the calm in their home, Maria could feel tension building outside. The villagers had begun to notice the stranger's presence, and whispers traveled quickly from house to house. Some were curious, others suspicious. They had heard rumors of a powerful noble traveling through the region, a man known for being strict and feared. Some villagers speculated that he might be dangerous, and they warned Maria to be careful. Maria tried to ignore the gossip. She knew that the man had come to her home in need and she had helped him. That was all that mattered. But sometimes, late at night, she would hear the wind rustling the trees and imagine soldiers or strangers approaching. She would wake to check the doors and windows, heart pounding, thankful each time that all was still safe. One morning, the man was able to walk outside with Maria's support. The air was crisp, and the sun shone brightly over the village. Maria had prepared a small garden path with flowers and herbs, and she encouraged him to walk slowly, giving his legs strength. The girls followed closely, Sophie holding his hand, Anna supporting his arm, and Leela pointing out the small birds that had come to feed. He smiled at them, a small, genuine smile that lit up his face in a way that made Maria's heart lift. "You have done more for me than I can say," he said softly. "I have never known kindness like this." Maria shook her head. "Kindness is not something to measure. You needed help. That is enough." Despite his words, there was a sadness in his eyes, a shadow of a life filled with hardships. He spoke little about it, and Maria did not press. She had learned that sometimes the most important thing a person needed was simply to be safe and cared for. As the days went by, the man began to participate in the small routines of village life. He helped Maria repair a fence that had been damaged in the last storm, carrying heavy logs with surprising ease. He worked alongside the daughters in the garden, planting seeds and watering plants, always with careful attention and patience. The villagers began to notice the change in him, the way he moved and spoke, and how he treated Maria and her daughters with respect. Some were impressed, others suspicious, but no one could deny that he was different from the travelers they had known. Anna spent hours talking to him while working on household chores. She asked about the places he had been, about the people he had met, and about the dangers he had faced. He answered carefully, never revealing too much, but his stories fascinated her. She had always dreamed of adventure, but she had never imagined that it could come in the form of someone visiting her quiet home. Leela, meanwhile, loved to ask him about faraway lands. She imagined a world beyond the village, a place where he had walked streets filled with people, seen mountains and rivers far larger than any in their home. Sophie was simpler in her curiosity. She asked about his favorite foods, his favorite games, and why he had so many scars. The man would smile at her questions, answering patiently, even when the questions were repeated or silly. One afternoon, as the man rested on the porch, a traveler came down the village road. He had been passing through on his way to a nearby town and noticed the stranger sitting quietly in the sun. The traveler stopped and stared, his eyes widening in recognition. "Is that?" he whispered to himself. Maria, nearby, noticed the change in the traveler's expression and felt a shiver of worry. The traveler approached cautiously and Maria stepped forward to greet him. "Good afternoon. Can I help you?" she asked politely. The traveler's gaze shifted to the man resting on the porch. You are hiding the wounded man, aren't you?" he asked, voice trembling slightly. "Do you know who he is?" Maria shook her head. "No, I do not. He came here injured. I only tried to help him." The traveler looked from Maria to the stranger, then back again. "You do not understand," he said softly. "This man is not just any traveler. He is Duke Edward, the most feared noble in the region. Many call him ruthless, but others respect his decisions. You have given shelter to someone very powerful." Maria's heart skipped a beat. She felt a mixture of fear and disbelief. The man, their guest, the one they had cared for, he was not a simple traveler at all. He was someone important, someone whose presence could bring danger to their home. She felt a tight knot of worry. Could they really be safe with him here? The stranger, Duke Edward, stood slowly, his expression calm but serious. He looked at Maria and her daughters as if understanding the worry on their faces. "You have nothing to fear from me," he said quietly. "I came here seeking no trouble. I am grateful for your help." Maria wanted to believe him, but the fear in her mind was strong. "But people will talk," she said softly. "They will come asking questions. They will think we are harboring someone dangerous." Edward shook his head. "Let them talk. What matters is what is right, not what is feared. You saved me when I needed help, and that is more than most would do. I will not forget it." The traveler nodded and left, warning Maria to be careful. Maria closed the door, her hands trembling slightly. She looked at the Duke, who was sitting quietly on the porch watching the sun set. "Are you really who he says you are?" she asked softly. Edward smiled faintly. "I am, but that does not change what has happened here. You cared for me when no one else would. That is what matters." The daughters looked at him with wide eyes. Anna felt a strange mixture of awe and fear. Leela was fascinated, her imagination running wild with stories of dukes and faraway lands. Sophie, as always, was simple and curious, running up to him to ask if he wanted some bread. Edward laughed softly, the sound gentle and warm. Over the next few days, Maria tried to prepare her family for the possibility of danger. She taught the daughters to be cautious, to watch for strangers, and to lock doors carefully. She also reminded herself to stay calm, to treat Edward with the same kindness and respect she had shown before, despite knowing who he was. Edward, for his part, respected their caution. He moved quietly around the house, never drawing attention, and continued to help in small ways. He spoke to the villagers when necessary, introducing himself without revealing too much, and his calm manners quickly earned their respect. One evening, after a long day of work in the garden and house, Maria and her daughters sat around the fire. Edward had prepared some small repairs to the home, and the family shared bread and cheese. The atmosphere was quiet, filled with warmth and the smell of firewood. Anna asked Edward about his life, carefully choosing her words. "Were you always a duke?" she asked softly. Edward paused, looking into the flames. "No," he said quietly. "I have learned much since I was young. Life has been hard and I have made decisions that were not always easy, but those experiences shaped who I am today." Leela leaned forward, eyes sparkling. "Do you think life is always hard?" Edward smiled. "Not always, but sometimes it is how we face hardship that shows our true character. You three have shown me kindness and courage. That is rare in any world." Sophie, who had been quiet most of the evening, climbed onto Edward's lap and whispered, "Thank you for staying with us." Edward held her gently, feeling a warmth he had never known before. Maria watched them all, feeling a quiet pride and relief. Perhaps the world outside was harsh and dangerous, But within their small home, there was care, courage, and kindness. Edward was no longer just a wounded stranger. He was a part of their lives, even if only for a short time. As night fell and the fire burned low, Maria felt a sense of hope. Life was unpredictable, and they had no way of knowing what tomorrow would bring. But for now, they were safe, and they had each other. She looked at Edward, seated quietly by the fire, and thought that perhaps this encounter, this stranger who had entered their lives by chance, was a lesson in trust, courage, and the power of kindness. And though Edward had yet to reveal his full story, Maria could feel that their lives were about to change in ways none of them could imagine. The village had returned to its quiet rhythm after the storm, but a sense of tension lingered in the air. Maria could feel it whenever she walked outside or listened to the whispers of the neighbors. The stranger who had arrived so unexpectedly, Duke Edward, as they now knew, was no longer a simple traveler in the villagers' eyes. His identity had changed everything. People spoke in hushed tones about the Duke who had been feared for years, someone who was strict and powerful. They wondered why he had come to a small village like theirs, injured and alone. Maria tried not to let the rumors reach her daughters. She wanted them to continue treating Edward as they always had, like a man in need, not a nobleman with a dangerous reputation. But Anna could not help but notice the change in how the villagers looked at them. She saw the curiosity in their eyes, and in some faces she sensed fear. Leela, meanwhile, was fascinated. She whispered to Anna, "Do you think he is really as strong as they say? Do you think he could be dangerous?" Anna shushed her, though even she could not fully ignore the questions forming in her mind. Sophie, the youngest, simply wanted him to stay and play with her, unaware of the whispers outside. Edward, for his part, moved carefully around the village. He did not want to cause alarm or draw unnecessary attention. He continued helping with chores and repairs, his hands steady and precise, and his calm manner won the trust of many who had initially been suspicious. Still, the moment someone mentioned his name, the atmosphere changed. People would whisper, lower their voices, or look away, as if speaking his name aloud might summon danger. One morning, a traveling merchant arrived in the village. He carried a small cart filled with cloth, spices, and goods from distant towns. When he saw Edward walking past the market square, helping Maria's daughters carry baskets, recognition flashed in his eyes. He had heard of Duke Edward and knew the tales of his power. The merchant hesitated for a moment, then approached Maria's home, curiosity and caution guiding his steps. Maria opened the door cautiously. "Good morning," she said. "Can I help you?" The merchant looked at her with wide eyes. You are sheltering him," he asked quietly, almost as if afraid to say the words. "Do you know who he is?" Maria shook her head. "I know only that he was injured and needed help. That is all." The merchant's expression changed to concern. "You do not understand. He is Duke Edward, the most feared noble in this region. He commands lands, soldiers, and respect. Some fear him, some obey him, but few know him personally. To help him, you are risking much." Maria felt a cold shiver run through her. She looked toward Edward, who was sitting quietly in the shade, listening but not speaking. She could see the calm in his eyes, the quiet strength, and she knew that he did not mean any harm. Still, the thought of what the villagers might do or think made her heart pound. Edward rose slowly and approached Maria. "There is no need to fear," he said calmly. "I did not come here seeking power or influence. I came seeking shelter and rest. That is all. I will not bring harm to anyone here." Maria nodded, though the tension did not fully leave her. "But what if they discover who you are?" she asked softly. "What if they come demanding answers?" Edward placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "Then they will see that I am no threat, and if they question you, you will only tell the truth. You helped a man in need. That is all that matters." Despite his calm words, Maria knew that the village was beginning to stir. People were curious, and curiosity in a small community could quickly turn into fear or gossip. She called her daughters together. "You must be careful," she told them. "Do not talk too much about who he is. Treat him as you always have, but do not share his identity." The girls nodded, though Anna could feel a flutter of excitement mixed with fear. Edward was no ordinary man. He was powerful, and yet here he was, resting in their home as if he were one of them. Leela whispered to Anna, "Do you think he trusts us?" Anna smiled. "I think he does. That is why he is here." The days went by and Edward continued to recover. His strength returned slowly, and he began to take small walks outside the village. He spoke with Maria and her daughters about ordinary things, the weather, crops, cooking, but avoided mentioning his duties as a duke. He wanted to live quietly for a short while, away from the responsibilities and expectations that came with his title. One afternoon, as he walked along the edge of the village with Anna and Leela, he shared a small piece of his past. "I have spent much of my life in the city, managing lands and people," he said quietly. "It is a life filled with rules, duties, and expectations. I do not always enjoy it, but it is necessary." Anna looked at him carefully. "Do you ever wish you could be free?" "To live without rules?" she asked. Edward smiled faintly. "Sometimes, but life is what it is. I have responsibilities that I cannot ignore. That is why I came here, because for the first time in a long while I could be simply myself." Leela's eyes sparkled with curiosity. "Do you like being here?" she asked. Edward nodded. "Yes, here people care for one another. Here I am not judged by my power or title, but by who I am. It is refreshing." Meanwhile, back in the village, rumors were spreading faster than Maria could manage. Some villagers whispered that a powerful noble had been seen in their home. Others speculated that the family was hiding someone dangerous. A few brave neighbors came to Maria, politely asking if it was true that she had been sheltering a stranger. Maria repeated what she had told them before. The man had been injured, and they had only helped him. She avoided using his name, careful not to reveal more than necessary. The tension grew when a small group of villagers decided to confront Maria. They arrived at her home one morning, voices low but urgent. "Maria," one of them said, "we have heard that a powerful man has been seen here. Who is he? Why is he staying with you?" Maria took a deep breath. "He was injured," she said firmly. "He needed help and I helped him." "That is all. There is no reason for alarm." Some villagers were satisfied with her answer, while others remained wary. Edward, standing quietly behind Maria, did not raise his voice or react aggressively. He simply nodded, acknowledging her courage and calmness. His presence, calm and respectful, began to reassure even the skeptical villagers. As the day ended, Edward sat with Maria and the daughters near the fire. "You have shown courage," he said softly. "It is not easy to face fear and rumors. But you have done so with grace and honesty. That is rare." Maria smiled faintly. "We only did what we had to do. Helping someone in need is never wrong." Edward nodded. "True, and it is a lesson I have not forgotten. You have reminded me that kindness is stronger than fear." That night the family sat quietly, reflecting on the events of the day. The tension from the village had not fully disappeared, but Maria felt a sense of pride. They had faced fear and gossip, yet they had not wavered. They had treated Edward with respect and kindness, and in return, he had shown them patience, gratitude, and humility. Over the next few days, Edward began helping Maria and her daughters plan small improvements for their home. He repaired fences, fixed broken windows, and even built a small tool shed. His knowledge and experience were impressive, and the daughters were amazed at how skilled he was at simple tasks. Anna, in particular, found herself drawn to him, fascinated by his calm strength and the way he treated everyone with fairness and respect. Leela loved to listen to his quiet stories, imagining adventures in lands far away. Sophie simply enjoyed his company, laughing at his jokes and helping him with small chores. One afternoon, as the sun was setting, Edward took Maria aside. "You worry about what the villagers think," he said softly. Do not. They may not understand now, but in time they will see the truth. You acted with honesty and courage. That is what matters, Maria nodded. I hope you are right, she said. I only want my daughters to be safe. Edward smiled gently. They are safe, and they are strong. I see courage in each of them just as I see courage in you. The day ended with a quiet sense of peace. The village had begun to accept Edward's presence, though curiosity remained. Maria knew that eventually the world outside would demand answers, and the time might come when Edward would have to leave. But for now, they had a moment of calm, a chance to live without fear, and a reminder that kindness could bridge even the greatest differences. As night fell, the family gathered near the fire. Edward looked at the daughters, seeing their bright eyes and curious faces, and felt a warmth he had never known. He had come to this small village wounded and alone, yet he had found something more valuable than he had imagined: trust, care, and the quiet courage of ordinary people who could act with extraordinary hearts. And in that moment, Maria realized that no matter what happened next, their lives had been changed forever. The Duke's presence had brought challenges, yes, but it had also brought lessons, hope, and a reminder that courage and kindness could overcome fear, even when the world seemed uncertain. The days that followed Edward's identity being revealed were a mixture of quiet relief and subtle tension. Most villagers had come to respect Maria and her daughters for their courage, but the knowledge that a powerful duke had been in their home lingered in conversations and curious glances. Maria noticed it each time she walked past a neighbor's house, each time someone paused and stared a little longer than usual. But she also noticed a change. People were kinder, more helpful. They admired her family's bravery, and some even offered small gifts of food or help with chores. Edward, despite being a duke with responsibilities and lands to oversee, continued to act with humility. He spent mornings helping in the garden or repairing fences, and afternoons walking through the village to understand the life of ordinary people. Maria's daughters enjoyed these moments, watching him interact with villagers in a gentle, respectful way that contrasted sharply with the rumors of ruthlessness that had preceded him. Anna found herself learning from him, not only about practical skills like fixing a fence or tending a garden, but also about patience, leadership, and quiet strength. Leela loved to hear his stories of distant lands and cities, imagining herself traveling with him, though she kept these dreams private. Sophie, innocent and full of joy, simply wanted him nearby, laughing at small jokes or helping her with chores. One afternoon, Edward called Maria aside. "I must prepare to return to my land soon," he said softly. His voice carried no fear or hesitation, only quiet responsibility. "My duties cannot be delayed any longer. But before I leave, I want to ensure that you and your daughters are safe and cared for." Maria nodded, a mix of pride and worry filling her chest. "We will be fine," she said. "But what will you do? You have responsibilities that cannot wait." Edward smiled faintly. "I will fulfill them as I must, but I will also carry the lessons I have learned here, and I will not forget the kindness you and your daughters have shown me." Over the next few days, Edward helped Maria's family prepare for his departure. He repaired the roof, built additional storage for vegetables and tools, and even arranged for a small supply of seeds and basic provisions to be sent to their home regularly. The villagers, who had watched his actions closely, were impressed by his generosity. Some whispered that perhaps the stories of a ruthless duke had been exaggerated. Here was a man who cared deeply for the people around him, not for wealth or power. Maria felt a mixture of emotions. She was proud of her daughters, who had faced the challenges of sheltering a powerful stranger with courage and kindness. She was grateful to Edward, whose presence had brought a sense of calm and purpose to their home. And she was sad, knowing that soon he would leave, and their lives would return to their quiet, difficult rhythm. The night before his departure, Edward sat with the family near the fireplace. "You have shown me a life I had forgotten existed," he said quietly. "A life of honesty, courage, and care. You reminded me that strength is not only in power but in compassion and trust. For that, I am forever grateful." Anna felt her heart beat faster. She had grown close to Edward over the past weeks, learning from him, laughing with him, and even admiring his quiet strength. She wanted to say something, but the words stuck in her throat. Instead, she smiled softly, understanding that their bond did not need words. Leela, full of curiosity, asked, "Will you come back?" Edward's eyes softened. "If fate allows, yes," he said. "But no matter what happens, know that you have left a lasting mark on my life." Sophie, ever innocent, ran to him and hugged his arm. "Don't go too far," she whispered. Edward knelt and hugged her gently, ruffling her hair. "I will not forget you," he said, "and I will always remember the laughter and joy you shared with me." The next morning, Edward prepared to leave. Villagers had gathered quietly at the edge of the village, not daring to approach too closely, but curious to see the man who had stayed in Maria's home. Some nodded respectfully, while others whispered words of admiration and awe. Maria, standing at the doorway with her daughters, felt a mixture of pride, sadness, and hope. Edward approached them, carrying a small satchel with provisions for the family. "This is for you," he said, handing it to Maria. "It is not much, but it will help with the work ahead. And it is a reminder that kindness is never forgotten." Maria took the satchel with trembling hands. "Thank you," she said simply. "You have changed our lives." Edward smiled faintly. "And you have changed mine." Remember, courage is not only in facing danger, it is in doing what is right, even when it is difficult. You and your daughters have shown that courage every day. He turned to the daughters. "Take care of one another," he said. "Help those in need, and remember that small acts of kindness can create ripples far greater than you imagine." Anna stepped forward. We will never forget you," she said softly. "Thank you for everything." Edward nodded and embraced them briefly, careful not to linger too long. He knew that their lives were theirs, and he could not remain forever. But the bond they had formed would remain in memory, a quiet strength that would endure long after he had left. With a final nod to Maria and her daughters, Edward mounted his horse and rode slowly down the road, his figure silhouetted against the rising sun. The village watched in silence, some in awe, some in quiet admiration. Maria felt a tear slip down her cheek, but it was not sadness alone. It was a mixture of gratitude and hope. They had faced challenges, shown courage, and experienced something extraordinary. Their lives had been touched by a man who was both powerful and humble, and the lessons he left behind were far more valuable than any material gift. In the days that followed, life in the village returned to its quiet rhythm, but it was different now. The family felt stronger, more confident. Anna took on new responsibilities, helping her mother with the farm work and teaching Sophie and Leela new skills. Leela spent her days reading and imagining new adventures, inspired by Edward's stories of faraway lands. Sophie, full of joy and curiosity, continued to explore the world around her, but now with a sense of courage she had not known before. Maria noticed small changes in the villagers as well. People were kinder, more willing to help one another. Some who had been skeptical of her family's courage now approached them with respect, asking for advice or assistance. It was as if Edward's presence had left a quiet mark on the village itself, a reminder that courage and kindness were powerful forces. Months later, Maria and her daughters worked in the garden one morning when a small package arrived at their doorstep. It was from Edward, a note accompanied by seeds for flowers, vegetables, and herbs, along with simple tools to help their work. The note read, "For your courage, your kindness, and the lives you have touched, may these gifts help you grow and thrive as you have helped me." Tears welled in Maria's eyes as she read the note aloud. The daughters gathered around, marveling at the thoughtfulness of the gift. It was a small gesture, yet it carried immense meaning. Edward had remembered them, even from afar, and had taken the time to show his gratitude. The family worked together, planting the seeds and tending the garden. Each day they remembered Edward's words about courage, kindness, and trust. They knew that life would continue to bring challenges, but they felt stronger, more capable, and more connected to one another. The bond they had formed with Edward, though brief, had left a lasting mark on their hearts. One evening, as the sun set and the sky turned golden, Maria sat with her daughters on the porch. "You see," she said softly, "even a stranger can teach us something important. Even a duke, someone so powerful, can remind us of what truly matters: honesty, courage, and care for one another." Anna nodded, looking at the horizon where Edward had last ridden. "I will never forget him," she said. "And I will try to live as he showed us, kindly, bravely, and with respect for others." Leela smiled, her imagination running wild with stories of faraway lands and adventures yet to come. Sophie, still innocent and joyful, laughed and skipped around the garden, carrying small flowers she had picked for their home. Maria watched them all, feeling a sense of peace and hope. The world outside might be uncertain and challenging, but within their hearts, they carried courage, kindness, and the memory of someone extraordinary who had touched their lives. And though Edward was far away, his presence remained in the lessons he had left behind. Maria knew that one day perhaps he would return, but even if he did not, the family had been changed forever. They had faced fear, shown courage, and experienced the quiet power of kindness. The story of the wounded stranger who had entered their lives would remain with them always, a reminder that even the most ordinary people could touch greatness, and that greatness itself was sometimes found in the simplest acts of care. Life in the village continued, but Maria and her daughters carried a new light in their hearts. They worked, laughed, and dreamed together, stronger and braver than before. The lessons of courage, kindness, and trust had taken root, just like the seeds Edward had sent, promising growth, hope, and a future filled with possibility.